I'd like to thank our sponsors, Blood Moon Box, a monthly subscription box service for period pads and tampons to help support all humans who have a cycle for that time of the month, and no need to run to a store to mix and match period supplies that don't cater to the entire ebbs and flows of your cycle. There are 2 box options based on your cycle, light and medium, and then heavy. And in addition to the period products, you'll also receive PMS herbal teas, a candle, and some other items for your time of the month. You can reserve a box by navigating to bloodmoonbox.com. And bloodmoonbox.com is on a mission to destigmatize the idea of period blood. At Blood Moon Box, they believe that it is the time to honor the enchanting magic within every person who has a cycle. So join us in embracing the magic of your cycle with Blood Moon Box. Hi, my name is Yasmin Tarehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, consciousness, and spirituality. Today's episode is with Scott Britton, an entrepreneur, content creator, and consciousness explorer. His most recent startup, Troops, was acquired by Salesforce, where he received the Forbes 30 Under 30 Award for Enterprise Technology. He is also the host of Evolution FM podcast and the author of the Substack blog, Consciousness, The Doorway to Human Evolution, where he writes about how we can use everyday life to expand our consciousness and redefine what is possible for the human experience. I am so excited to welcome Scott to the show. So welcome, Scott.
It's wonderful to be here, Yasmin. Thanks for having me.
So, Scott, can you tell us, what exactly is intuition in your own words?
I believe that it is a divine connection, really, to a part of our being that is eternal, that is all-seeing, that is not bound by time or space, and has the prerogative of helping us navigate this experience for our highest good and the highest good of all. And so I think that that is really the crux of it for me. I think there are definitions like an inner knowing, but I think the meaning to me is more about a connection with that deeper part of self.
And Scott, what does it feel like to have an intuitive insight versus an insight that comes from, let's say, the mind, for example? What does that feel like to you? What is that experience like for you?
For me, it's very audible. I liken it to it's kind of like there's different voices in my awareness. And over time, in working with those different voices, I've kind of learned to discern the different texture. And I definitely know what my kind of ego and conditioning sounds like. And the intuitive insights, whether they are spontaneous or they are kind of done in an active querying method, are much kind of like softer, clear, loving presence. And it's my belief that over time, if you really do enough kind of purification and learn to work with these different sources of information, you can have access to that whenever you want.
I love that. I love that you say that it's softer and kind of gentler for you when it's an intuitive voice. That's also been my experience. And I think people sometimes think that if something, is the path that you're supposed to take, that it's going to be coming, glaring red lights. But yeah, intuition for me also has felt very similarly. And Scott, what is like maybe an experience or early experience that you had of an intuitive insight that really helped you move forward on your path? If you can describe like maybe your first or early experience.
Yeah, I think think there was definitely an inflection point for me where I had been experiencing emergent information in my awareness through different types of kind of emotional healing practice. And it started to get me curious around, well, what else can I ask the stillness? Like, how else can I engage with this source of information? And I was actually buying a house in Austin where I live now. And I had this experience where I found this house I really liked. I put in an offer and I got beat out. And a basically my broker had said, "Hey, do we want to just put in a backup?" And so I put in a backup, and it turns out that that offer that beat me out had fallen through, and the price had been about $40,000 over asking. And when he asked me if I wanted to put in a counter offer, I was kind of like, you know what, I'm just gonna test this out. Like, I'm gonna see what the stillness tells me to bid here. And the answer that I got was a number that was $30,000 above the asking price. And when I told this to my agent, he said, "Well, the price has already been set. There was 3 other offers. Like, you're probably going to lose if you don't at least match the offer that won." And I didn't really feel like I had much to lose, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to test this $30,000 offer that popped into my awareness. And it turns out that my agent was right. I didn't have the highest offer, but for some reason, the builders had chosen me. And it was so cool because it was an example, I guess, a sign to me that A, this house was meant for me, but B, that amazing, improbable, and favorable things could happen when I trusted that inner stillness, the voice in the inner stillness, even in the face of conventional logic. And so that really kind of set me off on a path of deep exploration and really a desire to work with cultivating and refining intuition. And so I would say that was a very formative experience for me.
That is so cool, Scott. I love that. I love that you trusted your intuition and it saved you 10 grand.
Yeah, right. Hey, intuition will save you money.
Yeah. So Scott, can people cultivate intuition based on your research and experience, or do they have to be born with this kind of gift? What are some of the ways that you coach and teach people how to tap into their intuition?
So I think we all are born with this ability. I think it's like a natural human birthright. However, most of us forget or are unaware of this latent ability. And my experience is that it is both emergent as well as something that can be kind of polished and refined and further expanded. And so for me, it seems like the common thing that I see is what blocks our intuition is the vast amount of unhealed, unresolved information in our subconscious that is essentially kept out of our awareness in order to protect us. And so I think we spend a lot of energy unconsciously on suppressing that information. And when we start to heal those unseen, unacknowledged parts, my belief is that it frees up that energy to be used for more creative endeavors. There's lots of different explanations around like the mechanics of what happens next, but for me, I think the main takeaway is when you do a lot of inner work on facing, acknowledging traumas, working with patterns, just really learning to love yourself. A lot of times that opens the door to being a more clear channel for information. And so I think for me, that is certainly a big theme. I think meditation, learning to still the mind, also creates almost fertile conditions for insights to make it through into our awareness. And when you do those two things together, you might just start to notice that there's another source of information in your awareness that extends beyond just kind of like the conditioned information in our consciousness, the ego. Yeah, I would say that that's kind of been my experience. I would be curious what your experience is.
on how I help people cultivate their intuition. Gosh, okay. So,
Well, I guess more specifically, like, do you think it's something that can be anybody can develop, or and how do people go about doing that?
that's a great question. um, so I definitely agree with you, and I think that everyone has an intuitive kind of extrasensory perception. So I studied intuition at this school called the Academy of Intuition Medicine, and we learned, I believe, it was like 21 or so extrasensory intuitive senses. So things like clairaudience, clairsentience, claircognizance. And what I found in the program with other students was that everyone had their own kind of superpower. So for me, it was clairaudience. I think you also mentioned yours is clairaudience. It comes in voice, tapping into this consciousness. And with other people, it comes in seeing, it can come in smell. So I've seen people really develop and hone their intuition through constant practice and guidance and meditation. And I've also just met people who really had a heightened kind of extrasensory perception from a very young age. So I've seen it all across the board, but I do believe, similar to you, that everyone has this gift. It's just that 99.9% of the people on the planet are not practicing this gift.
I agree. It's so man, it's just like we have this amazing inner technology, and we're so focused on everything everything outside ourselves, we kind of forgot about it. So
yeah,
I'm super excited that people like you are out there in the world helping people know about this.
Oh my gosh, likewise, Scott. I feel the same way about you. And, it's interesting because I don't know if I mentioned this to you in our earlier conversation, but it sort of feels like the word intuition, I think, is not quite landing on people because it sort of feels like people search for answers when things are not going right in their life, like a health issue or relationship issue. And then there's a lot of desire for doing the work when things fall apart. But I think there's this whole other kind of use case of intuition, which is, like you mentioned, is to help people connect with their deepest creativity and to basically use consciousness to guide them to create and to build and to love. And that, unfortunately, most people, I think, are creating from the mind and not from their intuitive heart. And so we see the output of that in culture. It feels like things are less memorable, But, what does spirituality mean to you? I know you've written about this topic, which, by the way, for those listening, you have to check out Scott's blog. It is really amazing. It's called The Doorway to Human Evolution. Consciousness, The Doorway to Human Evolution. So definitely go check that out. Scott is a prolific writer, and I don't give that compliment easily. so check it out.
Making me blush, Yasmin.
Yeah, I was very taken by your writing. So yeah, I'd like to kick it off and ask, what does spirituality mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, man, it's such an interesting question. Like, I really just believe like we are an emanation of the highest power of God, of this of the intelligence that animates all of life. And we forgot about that. And we forgot that divinity that exists in all of us. And so for me, spirituality is about reconnecting with that. It's about, and in that process of reconnecting with that, there is a deeper connection with everything that you see around you, including other people. Because so much of spiritual evolution, inner transformation kind of brings us back to this interconnected nature of reality and the beings that we are. And so for me, it's just a deepening of embodying that, um, which is a beautiful, beautiful journey, and full of revelation and awe and lots of good stuff. It also is hard as hell at times, but the rewards far outweigh the difficulties in my experience.
What do you say to someone who has never maybe had that experience of connecting with this divinity or to God or, to this consciousness that you speak about? Because I think that's a question that has come up time and time again. A lot of people say, well, I've never had that experience, or I don't know what that's like. What would you say to them?
I would say, like, I think we all kind of have that experience when we're supposed to. And so part of my, when I kind of got into all of this, I was really excited to share it with everyone, like many people that have that kind of initial experience. And what I found was, some people were into it. Many people were not. Many people were not excited about even the potential of going there. And I think gradually I just realized that, like, hey, we're all on our own unique journey and our own unique timeline. And I think as divine beings, we all come here for different reasons. And, for some of us, it is to uplift our consciousness, expand our awareness, and come into greater knowing of the truth about who we are. And for other people, it's to have a hell of a time and make a lot of money and, do all the stuff they want to do. And that's cool too. And so, like, if people say to me, like, I've never had anything like that, it's like, I kind of just try to gauge whether somebody is genuinely curious about seeking that out, or if they're just not interested, and I kind of drop it. I think if someone is very curious, I try to just share my own story, which was like, I never believed in any of this. I never had a spiritual experience. I never, basically, I think a lot of us have to kind of reach a certain point of, like, our current paradigm is not working for us in order for us to seek out a new one. And that's what happened to me. And, the practicalities of that first spiritual experience was in a plant medicine ceremony, because I was kind of not happy. And so, I think there are certainly, like, reliable tools that people can go and have that experience if they want it, but they kind of have to get up there on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also curious if you feel comfortable sharing your kind of experience in the plant medicine journey and the awakening that you had, specifically about Kundalini. If you feel open sharing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why not?
Okay. Yeah. I'd love to hear more about that.
So, yeah, as a backdrop, I had never done any drugs. Like, I drank alcohol, I had coffee, but, like, was really kind of not into mind altering substances, especially ones that weren't legal. And, I'd just been running my company for about 5 years. I was really burnt out, and I had a lot of entrepreneur friends who had done ayahuasca. And that was interesting to me because so many of them had mentioned how it really changed their perspective on the world, and that perspective was enduring. And so, long story short, I had a friend who was organizing the ceremony. I joined, and the the first experience, there's a lot of things that happened, but I think the most profound thing that happened was I encountered the I now call it the true self. But I encountered a presence in my awareness that wasn't my thoughts. And it was like I could have a conversation with this presence that seemed to know everything, seemed to love me. I genuinely felt like I was connecting with God or the highest power. At the time, I felt like I was connecting with God specifically. And it told me all about my life. It told me things like, hey, you've been here before and you've been here many times. Be here again. And, like all religions are intended to bring back people back to the truth that they are love. And I was just having my mind blown by this information. And that that was like really, really profound. And it essentially sparked my desire to stabilize that, because for anybody that has done plant medicine knows, like, what it does is it depending, obviously different experiences, different plants have different experiences, but by and large, like, it kind of upshifts your consciousness into a more expanded awareness. And then there's a bunch of amazing insights and things. And then you kind of normalize back down to what being you felt like before. And it's your job to go out in the world and figure out what you need to do to further embody that experience and kind of continue your growth. And so, yeah, that really kind of set me off on the spiritual path and the desire to explore. And what happened was, I basically 3 months later, I had another friend who was like, hey, I'm doing a ceremony. And I had such a positive experience. I was like, yeah, I want to do another one. Of course. Like, that was amazing. And during that experience, I had a tough experience. And the cliff note of that was that I basically, on my final night, had like this energy that was like shaking, moving through my body for like 6 hours straight. It was very somatic. I looked like a Mexican jumping bean. And it was like exhausting, like shaking for 6 hours straight. I probably lost 10 pounds. I was exhausted. And what happened after that was, I had assumed that it was, there's this concept of with ayahuasca that you'll purge, where it's like you'll throw up or maybe go to the bathroom or maybe you'll shake stuff out. And so I had assumed that I was just purging. And what happened was, in the days, weeks, months, truly years afterwards, I started to shake. I started to experience that energy when my mind was quiet. And so like 5 to 10 times a day, I was just like vibrating involuntarily. And, I was quite concerned. I didn't really know what was happening to me. I thought I had epilepsy or Parkinson's, and I did all of this Western medicine testing, and no one could give me any answers. Even when I was hooked up to, some type of brain MRI, like gyrating like like a jackhammer in the hospital, like everyone's like, yeah, no, you look fine. It's probably stress. And I'm like, dude, I have ran a startup for 5 years. I know what stress looks like. This isn't stress. And I had read about Kundalini on the internet. And when you Google like shaking during meditation, it came up. And that figuring out what was happening to me was what really, really made spirituality like front and center of my life. And so it would be a long time before I truly understood kind of Kundalini and how to work with it and what it is. But, I think that experience also speaks to the unintended consequences that can happen with plant medicine. Like, I didn't want to enter this kind of transformative, energetic process. Like, I wanted to just get some business insights and feel better and all that kind of stuff. And life just had another idea for me. And, that was that was the next big inflection point for me.
Wow. Yeah. So much to double click on in that share. Thanks, Scott, for sharing your experience. I mean, it sounds like you mentioned like the unintended consequences of plant medicine, but also, there was probably something within your field in which your soul was ready for it, or maybe wanted the experience. I don't know, or yeah, maybe that experience is the reason why we're talking today, like the reason why you spent so much of your life dedicated to this work. So it is interesting. I have also heard about negative consequences from plant medicine, which I think is a very important point to make because right now it does feel like there's just sort of positive stories about plant medicine out in the news and on shows, but there really is a lot of negative unintended consequences. And so I think people should be very aware of what they're getting themselves into when they walk into some of these ceremonies. I just want to share that because I've heard a lot of different anecdotes.
I appreciate you saying that because I agree. It seems like most people think it's a panacea to solve all of our problems. And, I just literally had a person message me on Instagram today that says, "Hey, I took ayahuasca a couple times and I'm completely not right. And it's been 4 years and I'm still messed up and I don't know what to do. Can you help me?" And so obviously that's just one person's experience, but this is serious stuff, and it should not be taken lightly. And, yeah, there needs to be, I think it would serve the world if there was a kind of greater reverence for these substances like there traditionally was, right? Like ancient civilizations, wisdom schools, there's traditionally been an initiatory process to, give people certain practices or substances when they were ready for them, by people that really, were stewards of that. And unfortunately, we don't really have the same type of setup today, and it's kind of turned into a more commercial industry. And it just presents challenges for certain people.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also these like the 2-day shaman, like the 1-year shaman,
Oh yeah,
which
it's like the online course shaman.
yeah, which just cracks me up. I'm like, wow, I don't think I would trust you to borrow my car. you know,
it,
um,
it reminds me of people that get ordained to marry people. It's online, to marry their friends. All right, let's keep it at that. Let's not do this for shamans.
Totally. Totally. It's quite alarming. And the story that you just mentioned, I have about 3 or 4 in my own circle who also had similar stories of pretty negative experiences. And I've also read, I mean, this is a little bit off the topic, so we'll get back into the intuition topic. But I also read that your chakras open up when you do plant medicine. And so if the setting
Oh
isn't
yeah.
right, if the shaman isn't right, if the energy space isn't right, then it actually can be really negative long term. So I think that this is such an important, I'm so happy that you brought this up because it is such an important point that that is not really talked about at all these days. So I think it's important to note, and I'm happy we're sharing that. But Scott, I want to talk a little bit about abundance. We're going to switch gears a little bit. You wrote an article about abundance, how to cultivate abundance, and I want to really discuss how you think about abundance in general in your life.
Yeah, it's a really really good question. It's something that I frankly have needed to do a lot of work on. There's a period of time where I was, in my zeal for spirituality, I wasn't really sure what that meant for the material world. Um, and abundance. Like there was a perceived polarity that, like, having come from a world where I was so externally oriented and about trying to make money and trying to be successful and trying to like have all the experiences and all the things, like when I turned inward, it was like, okay, well, I can't, well, I guess I can't do that stuff anymore. And I guess I can't have a lot of like success and all that, because it's all about the inner game. And there was a huge kind of pendulum swing that occurred. And eventually, I had to overcome this mindset of either or, uh, in terms of spiritual evolution and I guess you would call it just like worldly prosperity. And that was a big area of work for me. And I think the way that I think about abundance now is like we are inherently abundant beings. Like we are divine, powerful, loving beings. And over the course of our lifetime, we have all these experiences that essentially kind of cover that up. And so like whether that's, being told we're not enough or being told we're no good, or even being subject to programming and spiritual culture, like, oh, you need to renunciate everything to be spiritual. Like all these are kind of contributors to our vault of information that informs how we engage the world. And to get back to that kind of original essence, it's really, for me, has been an unlayering process. So it's like it's not like becoming abundant. It's like you are abundant, but you need to examine the inner information and energy that in the form of thoughts and emotions and concepts that obscure that. And the easiest way that I found to do that is to observe in my life when I'm behaving in a way that is indicative of being unabundant. And so like it's kind of actually, in my opinion, like kind of different than what a lot of I hear out there. Like I feel like for a long time it was like, oh, like write manifestations, write affirmations that you're abundant, like listen to things that you're abundant. Like it was like adding things to be abundant versus something like, no, you are abundant and you just need to remove the material that says you're not. And so that's been my experience with it. And it's, it's still something that I need to, it's still something I'm working on, to be quite honest.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And I'm now just remembering the group chat that we're on when we talked a little bit about abundance. And I think there's just a lot of differing opinions when it comes to this topic, because I think it's about safety and security and self-worth and self-value and self-esteem. And there's just so much wrapped up in the word abundance. And I think it just evokes,
Totally.
right? It just evokes so many feelings for so many people. But that it is an interesting point of view, when you realize that you are this infinite being and purely, consciousness illuminating this human body, then there's a lot of traditions, of course, that do, create this minimalistic perspective on life, which is very much focused on using only what you need. But I think it depends also on your worldview, whether one believes that this is all just the matrix and we're creating this whole scheme on earth anyway. So it's not necessarily a zero sum game, but it's a win-win reality, which I believe I'm leaning a little bit more towards. I sort of feel like this is a game and a dream at the same time. And it's just that most people don't know it's a game. And even if they know it's a game, they don't know the rules of the game.
I think that's a cool frame. One thing I think a lot about is like, we just don't have a storied tradition of pursuing spiritual evolution and being what has been called a householder, like for hundreds, thousands of years. It's like if you wanted to become enlightened, or you wanted to go really deep spiritually, like you did have to go become a monk, or you did have to become a yogi, or you did have to go and kind of become some form of renunciate. And it wasn't really, at least from the things that I've read, like until to like the late 1800s, 1900s, that in certain traditions, like the stewards of yoga and meditation and all of these kind of technologies that help people work on their consciousness were made available to people that were living a worldly life. And so I say that because I think, history vastly impacts our perceptions and the narratives. And, I just believe we're relatively young as a species, at least in certain, maybe indigenous tribes are different, but like, at least in Western society, it's like this idea that you can be a very devoted spiritual aspirant and person in the world is like a relatively new thing. And I think sometimes we forget that. And I think it's also why so many people do not know the rules of the game. Think we're playing a different game.
It's super, super fascinating. I love that the frame of the story evolution, and that we don't have a story for that. We haven't seen an example of it, and so we're sort of maybe leading that right now on the planet. And but it's interesting because it feels, oh gosh, I mean, we could probably spend hours just on this conversation alone. It feels also that there's this belief that if you have abundance, that another person has less. And I think that the zero-sum game frame for me feels erroneous. It just doesn't feel like that's the real rules of engagement that's happening on the planet. Because, and I, I'm going to allude to a woman named Sarah McCrum, who's on the show, who wrote the book The Energy of Money, in which she has a conversation similar to Conversations with God with I forget his name, Neil. Oh my gosh, I forget his name.
Neil Donald Walsh,
who's also on the show. But Sarah talks to money, and she has this conversation with money, and she makes a really good point. She's like, having more money just means that you can spend it on other people, on other things that will give people more money. And so if we, let's say, use that money to educate ourselves or to have a new experience, then we enlighten people around us. We use the money to then give people the opportunity to enlighten themselves in whatever way. It could be educational. It could be, everything is kind of educational, even things that are maybe harmful, right? We learn a lot from harmful experiences. So there is like an exponential quality to having money move around and for abundance and prosperity to come in, which I thought was a fascinating point of view. I mean, she's right, So
that is really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, okay, so we have so much to cover and very little time left. So Scott, you talk about in one of your articles waking up in the middle of the night. What does that mean to you?
Oh yeah, big one. Well, I had this this thing going on with me for years where I would wake up every night around 2:00 or something like that. 1:30, 2:30, something around that hour. And for a very long time, I thought something was wrong with me. I was like, why am I waking up? Everyone else is sleeping. Everyone else can sleep through the night. And I did all types of attempted remedies, sleep hygiene. It was like, oh, is my liver messed up? This is the liver circadian rhythm. Like just all kinds of things all kinds of kind of physicalist approaches to solving my sleep. And I forget exactly where I heard this, but somebody said to me once, like, well, what if you're being woken up for a reason? Have you ever considered that? And I started to kind of play around with that, where I was like, all right, well, the first thing I'm going to do in the morning is meditate anyways. And maybe I should just be open to being up. And what I noticed is the other thing that kind of coincided with this was I noticed I would also often get downloads when I was woken up in the middle of the night. Like I would just have such a clear consciousness, and like information and ideas and creativity would just be flowing. And I would like be like reaching for my phone to like write stuff down because it was so much. And there came a point where I was like, you know what? I'm going to lean into this. And I started to, when I woke up, like be like, kind of check in with that inner guide, like, hey, should I meditate? And if it, the answer what I was got, yes, I would get up and I would meditate at 2 a.m. And I just found that I've gotten so much, I have such a strong, clear connection to intuition and just the broader field of information that often like that is when I get the best information. And I was describing this experience to someone, which is, to most people, a very weird one. And he's like, there's a book about this where this researcher did, I guess like he did this study where he put people into like a dark room for like 4 weeks straight. And after a week or two, people began to wake up in the middle of the night after their sleep had been normalized. And it turns out that across many traditions or many civilizations and cultures, this was kind of common practice. It was called like God's hour, where it was well known that the time to connect with spirit was in the middle of the night after your first sleep. Because for a long time, humans were biphasic. And so, yeah, I've leaned into that. And some of the things that I find interesting or helpful around it are like, I'll write down questions I have before I go to bed. And oftentimes when I wake up, I'll have information like flow into my awareness around that. And it's just a cool thing to experiment with. If anybody else is already waking up, like why not just, if you have a meditation practice, like why not try it and see what happens?
I love this story so much, Scott. That's so cool. And there's something in yogic traditions in which it's called sadhana, which I think it's between 4 and 6 a.m. That's also a time to be with self and to be with the divine. But I love that you get woken up and can just get a lot of messages and downloads at that time. It reminds me also of this Rumi quote. Was it, "The morning breeze has secrets for you. Don't go back to sleep"? I don't know if you've heard that before.
Oh, that's sweet. I like that.
Yeah. I always tell myself that whenever I get woken up in the middle of the night. I'm just like, the morning breeze has secrets for you. Don't go back to sleep. Stay awake. But that's cool. Okay, so you ask questions. So what is your meditation practice like? Can you walk us through what you normally do?
Yeah, sure. So my whole like belief about life is that a huge part of it is to essentially wake us up. Like it's the events of life around you are being orchestrated in order to show you the inner material that is preventing you from realizing that you are the divine being that you are. And I kind of coined this term in because I don't know if there's a word for it. The responsive reality, where it's like, here's the next lesson in your curriculum, and it's being communicated through the people, places, and events around you. And what's indicative of our work is how we respond to it. Do we get triggered? Do we get frustrated? Do we exhibit a pattern that's indicative that we're operating from kind of that not the loving, open-hearted beings that we are? And so I have like a note I keep on my phone each day where I write down the times that I'm triggered, the times that I'm disturbed, different patterns that come up. Like last night I was at a dinner and I found myself getting kind of subtly defending my position. And that to me, like the way that I engage life is like the spiritual practice. And so I bring those scenarios and to contemplative practice, and I'm essentially kind of using them to access the underlying imprint in my subconscious that is driving that. And so I have like a methodology that I do where I kind of try to recall the experience or have a overtly express what I was feeling in the moment, and I drop into my body, and I feel a lot somatically. And I try to just open to the energy and allow it to move until I feel spaciousness, and then I insert new information that is aligned with what I believe is the natural state of trust and love and openness and gratitude, and that's kind of what I do. And so I do that. I usually have a couple things each day that kind of tick me off or whatever. And I've been doing this for a couple years, and it's just fundamentally changed the way that I show up. And I do that. And then I have this thing where I kind of separate. I have like two separate meditation practices. So I do what I call like the house cleaning. That's what I would refer to that. And then I eat breakfast, and then I do a separate sit where I think about what I'm grateful for. I pray for my intentions. I ask for help, and make kind of a declaration of what it is that I seek to bring into creation. And then I also pray for other people, pray for the world. And that's kind of like, and then I start my day. So that's my practice.
I love that so much. Amazing. And you mentioned prayer, which I think is something a lot of people don't do enough of. Is that something that you do every single day, pray?
Yeah, I do. I used to have a lot of resistance to prayer because I came from a Christian upbringing, and I had a lot of resistance around the church after I kind of got into the consciousness stuff. Like, I've been like duped and brainwashed and blah, blah, blah. But, eventually I got over that. And what I realized was like, what I observed and seemed to read about was like, we are supported by like so much love and like higher forces, I would call them, including the highest force. And we need to ask for help. We need to ask for what we want and for help. And I think a long time I was also nervous about that because I was concerned that might be like reinforcing my ego that like thinks it needs like external things to be okay. And the interesting thing that I've observed is that as you work on your consciousness and kind of return to your natural essence, the things that you want are actually things that are aligned with the greatest good. It's like there's an emergence of service, which actually becomes your genuine desire. And so like most of the things I pray for are like not about like, hey, like give me a sweet house, it's more like, please give me the information and ideas and concepts from my book that will help serve the most amount of people. And like I genuinely want that. And it's yeah, so a lot of that kind of like service component has made prayer like something that's like much more exciting to me. First, before I felt like I was failing spiritually if I was like asking for stuff.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. And I love that you're asking, what is in the highest service of where to direct your consciousness and energy and time on this planet. So Scott, what sort of things have surprised you the most looking back on your journey?
Good question. Um, I think I think the first thing that comes to mind is how hard it can be, to be honest. Um, I think a lot of people, you go on social media and whatever, and it's like you just see people talking about how amazing it is to be spiritual and blah, blah, blah. And like, I've gotten the shit kicked out of me, to be honest. Like, I've had like, if you really want to go there, it's like you got to get stripped down to rebuild yourself. Um, and that's certainly been my experience. And one of the really interesting parts about that is like, I always associated like letting go with kind of giving up or like having a lesser experience of some sort. And the times that I've really let go, like I've really said, universe, God, source, whatever name you want to use, take this, whatever you want to do here. I am good with it. I genuinely mean that. I'm not sneakily trying to say that to actually get what I want. Like, fucking take it. I have actually had the most support. Like the universe has conspired to bring me the thing like that is even better than I could have imagined. And so it's this fascinating paradox that goes against what we're told, which is like it's all up to us. And like the way to get what you want is to like push through and take control and take charge and own your destiny. And I actually just no longer think that that is the most powerful way to cultivate whatever it is you seek in your life.
That's such a very important point that I want to underscore because so much of our culture is we're sort of socialized to believe that we have to acquire and take and control things in order to get them. And your philosophy here is about letting go, which is about being the magnet and the attractor and also just allowing for, like you said, a higher outcome than you could ever have imagined possible with your mind, right? So that's really powerful. And so, Scott, what's your main takeaway or call to action? What do you want to tell our listeners?
Ooh, good one. I would say, because we started this intuition conversation, the next time you have something you want help with, write a note on your phone and call it like intuition note or something, and write that situation down. And if you have a meditation practice, bring that question or situation to the stillness, set the intention to receive guidance and see what happens. If you don't have a meditation practice, write it down before you go to sleep. And when you wake up in the middle of the night or in the morning, just try to be open to receiving and try to make the connect, try to see for yourself if that kind of provocation results in anything entering your awareness. Because I think that's a really important point. Like, I think a lot of people, they don't really like make the connection that like, hey, I asked for this thing and then something came, and they don't realize their power as a result or the level of agency that they have. And, yeah, I would try to just bring mindfulness to that to see what happens or doesn't happen and see for yourself.
And when you ask this question in meditation, do you just ask it once and then let it go? Or do you ask for a number of days? How do you do it?
I just like literally pose the question. So like, let's say, one of the things I've noticed is, the price of Bitcoin is going up and I'm like, okay, maybe I should buy some more Bitcoin. So like, I'll bring that question to the stillness and I'll just like kind of using my conscious awareness, I'll ask like, should I buy more Bitcoin? And I will just wait and I will get a clear directive. Um, and I'll know from the texture of the information whether it's coming from a higher source of information or just my thoughts. And so yeah, I just kind of ask the question. A lot of times I don't get the information immediately, and then like in the days later, I will. Like it'll something clear will come through. And so part of that experience is learning to trust that whatever information you need will come to you when you need it.
I love that.
And that's a lesson that you kind of have to learn in working with the experience.
Amazing. Amazing. Oh, love that so much, Scott. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to connect with you, Scott. Are there any resources that you can point folks to in order to learn more about you and your blog and your upcoming book?
Thanks. Yeah. I am on the internet, so you can find me. I do write a blog on Substack. You can search my name, Scott Britton, or Consciousness, the Doorway to Human Evolution. I also have a podcast that is called Evolution FM that talks about very similar topics to the show. And so if that's interesting to you, you can find me on YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get podcasts. And hopefully the book will be out sometime in the mid next year. I don't know what the name of it is yet, so I can't really tell you other than hopefully it'll be out there.
Yes. Amazing. Amazing. Scott, thank you so much for your time. This was just an incredible conversation, and I feel very inspired by you. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Yasmin. You're a wonderful host.
Oh, thanks. And for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. In this episode, we learned about the power of intuition with Scott Britton. And you can tune in to Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Thanks again. What would you like to see change in your life? And what is the biggest obstacle that you're facing now? I run a 5-week program at the Inner Knowing School for serious individuals who are ready to take the next step in their personal and professional lives. I will personally be coaching a small group of individuals, a number of practical tools and frameworks for creating an intuition practice and for self-mastery. You can find more at theinnerknowingschool.com. I have a master's certification in intuition medicine, and I've condensed 10 plus years of experience and research navigating how to harness your energy and intuition in an easy to access live curated course. Now, as someone who's helped countless creatives, entrepreneurs, and many who are just plain stuck, open doors of possibility they never thought existed, I've seen this strategy transform people's inner states and external reality. And the best part is that you'll skyrocket your output and unlock your creative genius. I'll work with you weekly live to overcome your limiting beliefs and show you how to manage your energy instead of your time. I'll teach you how to create clarity, processes, develop your intuition based on some of the top tools and frameworks that I've developed, and you'll get access to guided meditations and visualizations not available anywhere else. This method is so effective that even if you don't have that much time, or if you think that you might not be ready, this will work for you. You can check out the link in the show notes to join the waiting list, and you can check out what past clients had to say about the program. Wishing you all many blessings ahead.